We feel that Joel Barr uh, must have been a key participant involved in this espionage network that Julius Rosenberg had put together. We feel that was true for a few reasons. First, the FBI former Tardigo, who never knew or heard of Joel Barr at all, one of the things he reports to the FBI in his accounting of conversations with Julius in his cell is that Julius told him he was sure he was going to get out and he was sure he was going to get off because they had this man in Europe who was a pianist and who was also involved in engineering, who was one of the early members of their ring, and he managed to get out of the country. And from various other data he offered to the FBI, it was clear Julius was talking about Joel Barr. We know from the work of the key FBI agent in the case, Robert Lamphere, in his book, that one of the first things the FBI had when they found a secret code book in the World War II days, KGB code book, the code's name led, one of the names in the code book was Joel Barr. And through the name Joel Barr, that led eventually to the Rosenbergs. Barr's name was actually in the code book deciphered by Lamphere as part of his FBI duties.
The real Joe Barr is also Joseph Berg, Leningrad engineer and longtime Soviet Communist Party member. 40 years ago, Joel Barr was an out-of-work American communist engineer living in Paris. When the Rosenberg spy case broke, Barr, who was an old friend of the Rosenbergs, disappeared. How Brooklyn-born Joel Barr was transformed into a South African named Joseph Berg, and how he spent 40 years behind the Iron Curtain, is half of our story. Barr Berg is ready to break his long silence.
Я вам говорил. Yeah, I tell her. Now she's telling me how I always go up the stairs by foot. Да, и почему вы не сделали? Why didn't you do it? I told her, if you had done it, если вы бы ходили 9 этажей все время.
When Miriam and I first heard about Barr, we just thought of him as a very peripheral figure, and then we began reading what other people said, and they began making him more and more central to the case. People were saying, he changed his name, he was working in the Soviet Union, isn't that evidence? And now, of course, the real Joel Barr has emerged. He certainly is, in many ways, a very fabulous character, and the kind of life that he's lived, that few people in the 20th century have lived such a life.
Anna Staros also lives in Leningrad. She is the widow of Joseph Berg's best friend and Soviet boss, Philip Staros. 40 years ago, Anna's name was Carol Dayton, and Staros' name was Alfred Sarant. They were next-door neighbors in Ithaca, New York. Each was married to someone else, and each had 2 young children. In July 1950, after Julius Rosenberg was arrested and Alfred Sarant was intensively grilled by the FBI, Sarant and Carol Dayton disappeared together. At the time, she says, she did not realize that she was leaving her husband and children forever.
And when I left on the bus, he came and he said, I want you to know that I want you to come back. And I thought I would. So then we left in his car. We took his car and we drove it day and night. I drove it till I was getting sleepy, and then I slept in the car and he drove it till he was getting sleepy. When we first went to Mexico City, we didn't stay in one place longer than one night. We first checked in at a kind of a boarding house type hotel, and we discovered that it was just full of American kids escaping Vietnam or whatever, Korea or whatever it was, Korea then it was, you know. And they go out on the beach and they play around and everything and live in this kind of dump. I remember I took a shower and one of the boys there said, there's there's a hole in the door. It was a glass door, and it was all painted over. But there's a hole in the door, and he come and fixed it so that people wouldn't look at me while I'm taking a shower. There were lots of Americans there, too many. And they were all so friendly, you know. We got out of there. We went to the Polish embassy, which was on a little back street, and we went there once. It was on the second floor. We were taken up to the consulate. I guess it was a consulate, not really an embassy, probably. No, it was Mexico City. It might have been the embassy. But anyway, it was a very cultured, old-school diplomat from Poland. A wonderful person, very nice. And he talked to us. We explained that we had to get out, and could we go to Poland to build socialism, we said. And he took us to the window, and he said, see that building over there? It's mostly boarded up, and it seems to be empty. But they're photographing this place. He said, don't ever come here again, he says. So we look at him, what do we do then? And he said, not tonight, and not tomorrow night, but say, Friday night, you'll be in the park, which is 2 blocks down the way, at 9:30 in the evening. It's already dark by then in Mexico. Gets dark very suddenly. And don't come here anymore. He said, somebody will meet you there. If nobody's there on Friday, you keep coming until somebody meets you, which we did. We would go to this place in the evening, and I would walk around and walk around and walk around, and Phil would sit on the, Alfie, rather, he was still in, would sit on the bench and wait. And finally, a man came and sat on the bench with him and talked to him. It was a Pole speaking very gruff English. We had to laugh at his English, the way he did. He would say, how are you with money? We could hardly understand him. We'd say, we don't have very much. And he would give us some money and so on. And he talked to Phil about his problems there night after night after night. And he finally took us down near the river, and we stayed in a cabin that you could see through under the banana palms. And we took off our shoes and strung them over our backs like this and walked across the river at a certain place where it wasn't very high. We just got wet up to almost to our waists, maybe. And at one point I slipped a little bit, and he immediately grabbed me. He was just very careful that we were getting across, but the rocks were slippery. There were rocks there across the river. And then we went on. We were now in Guatemala. We went on up to a place where we were waiting for another car, and we lay in the grass, and it was about this high, and there was a fog all over, a morning fog, just all over the flat there. And we had to lie down in there between these weeds. They just were weeds. They weren't very tall at all. We had to lie completely down until another car came, and this car took us to Guatemala City.
Joel Barr, meanwhile, was working in Prague as Joseph Berg. The Soviets reunited Barr with his old friend and party comrade Sarant in Moscow.
All of a sudden, we're sitting there in the hotel, in the Moscow Hotel in Moscow, and in walks Joe. Absolutely white. He didn't have a tan yet, and looking so strange. We were absolutely floored.
The Czechs knew me, and they also knew about Sarant. You understand? Because it's clear that he asked for asylum in Poland, and the party apparently was organized. That is, the whole socialist camp was organized.
At that point, they said to Sarant, in effect, you wouldn't be too happy working in the Soviet Union as a Westerner. Why don't you at least at first go to Czechoslovakia and work there?
Obviously, he had something in him which I didn't understand, or maybe he didn't understand himself. I cannot say that that the first thing he thought about that when he got to the Soviet Union and the Czechoslovakia, that now he's going to open up a big business and he's going to, it couldn't have been that. It couldn't have been made for money or anything like that. It was just obviously a superior intellect, knowing that if he didn't get a position, and this was the argument that we had, that I remember we got into a sharp sort of, I said, listen, we're going to get this thing, going to have people, we don't speak the language. I spoke it a little bit, but not to that sense of, that extent of being able to make a speech openly and defending some kind of a complicated technical proposition. And here he was, without knowing the language at all, demanding, and this was very important, he said he would not take a job in which he was not the leader of at least 30 or 40 people.
The Americans flourished in Prague for a time. The Sarants started a family, and Bar married a Czech farmer's daughter against her family's wishes. He recalls a scene at his mother-in-law's funeral.
It was a family that's well known in the whole area, and the funeral was fantastic. There was maybe 200 people there, the whole village, everybody came to this funeral. And now just get this picture. The priest, the Catholic, who knew that I had changed the child, but the Catholic had converted her. Practically, she had become converted. I had taken away from the bosom of God. Understand? They didn't know I was Jewish. If they knew I was Jewish, it would have been a million times more, you might say, sharper, the things that they felt about me. And here we are walking behind the casket and going to the graveyard. And then the priest gets up to make the speech. And they understood some of it. And you know what he said? I have to... Sorry. He said that it was a curse of God that she had died and I had killed her. And I had to live through that.
Sarant and Bar started a laboratory and developed a guidance system for Czech anti-aircraft weapons. Later in Leningrad, they were known as the fathers of the Soviet computer industry.
So here we were already pretty well known, but we weren't making headway. And we were almost stymied, you know. We didn't feel that there was a way out of this position. We had tried everything. We're going to the minister time after time. We want this, that, and the other thing. Well, he keeps giving us something, but it's small fry. It's not what we want. And like a bolt out of the blue, call from Moscow, Khrushchev is coming to see you the day after tomorrow. So here we are, the center of attention of the electronic field, coming to see us. Well, the situation was really, the police cars coming up, you know, everything cleaning. It's a big building, if you know that building. It's a tremendous building. They cleaned everybody out, and that's where he was going to go. The corridors were freed from people, but the people anyway, they waited around, and I saw them as we were working. You know, we walked down the corridor. Here was Khrushchev, here was Al, and here was I. And there was a guy photographing all the time. He listened to us for 3 hours. We we showed him everything. We had this little tabletop computer working, making, you know, mistakes as a joke. We joked with him. He understood the jokes. He was very, very attentive. He was listening to our radio all the time, but that didn't affect him anyway. And then he got up and made the final speech. We handed him this proposal which we had prepared, which must be somewhere, in which we proposed making a it wasn't known as Silicon Valley then, but later it became known as the Silicon Valley of the Soviet Union. It was a project which to this day is unique. Not in America, nowhere in the world, not in Japan, is there such a gigantic thing which was built in about 2 or 3 years.
At one point, their institute had 5,000 employees. Sarant died in 1979, but Barr is still active. Recently, Barr returned to the United States for the first time since 1948. He came on a Soviet passport, not without anxiety.
But I wasn't really worried. Maybe it's because I'm 75 years old almost. There's something about that that gives a man a sort of feeling of, it really doesn't matter too much, one way or the other. But I was prepared. I'm not, and I think my thing would have been very, very, the idea was just to, since I have my documents and a person is known only by his documents, that I would have been Dr. Berg, a Soviet citizen who speaks only Russian.
Barr revisited some old New York haunts, including a restaurant he and Sarant had frequented in the early 1940s. The facade was unchanged, but not the prices.
I haven't been here for 40 years. Now, you don't remember it. What was it, 40 years?
No, I've been here since 49. I've been here 40 years.
You've been here also about 40 years. The steaks there that time cost $1.
Well, now they cost 15.
$15.
For the best steak in town.
What was Morton Street? I mean, you can talk frankly. It was your apartment.
It was our apartment where we lived with Al and had very many friends there and many evenings and had our girlfriends there, Who was living here when the FBI started to investigate? Already, none of
There was
our
nobody
friends.
living there by then. I think the last of the friends of yours who were there, as they passed it from apartment to apartment, probably left around the beginning of 1950.
Exactly.
So by the time they were investigating it, there was no one you knew that was there. But
I can't even remember what floor we were on. It seems to me on the second or the third floor, right?
what was the apartment?
I think the window was out here.
What was the apartment like? What was it furnished
Oh, you've
like?
never been in there?
No, I was never in there. What was you had furniture?
We had some kind of, I remember an easy chair there, those beds there. There was a sofa on which I slept.
Well, they claimed you did secret photography work there.
I'm a photographer, to this day. I had a lamp there and we used to take photographs.
Did you do anything special? Took pictures?
No, we took the pictures of the people there and stuff like that.
Barr also looked up an old friend who had been tried and convicted with the Rosenbergs and served 6 of his 19-year sentence on Alcatraz in San Francisco Bay. Morris Sobel has always proclaimed his innocence.
We can make money here. We put
I
up a
know, but
sign.
I told you not to mention the word money to me. It's verboten. Streng verboten.
What's the worst thing?
Streng verboten.
We put up a sign here.
Yeah.
10 cents to shake the hands of a guy.
Yeah.
And things like that.
10 cents? What are
10
you talking about? $10?
It's a lot of money
let's
in
go.
Russia.
When they put me in prison the next morning, the FBI came and they told me, the first thing they told me, was that I was going to get the death penalty. That was the first
Right
thing.
away.
Right away. And then the second thing was they told me that you had been in France and somehow
Aye.
Yeah,
They mentioned my name to you.
Yeah.
Right away.
Right away. And that you were sort of, had evaded them, but they were going to get you.
Do you have any feeling of animosity towards me?
Towards
or
you?
And Al or anybody in the whole period of that?
What are you talking about?
But did you know that we had escaped?
Yeah, I knew that you had beat them out. I knew that. We all knew that.
I think Sobel's behavior, again, is the thing that most condemned him. His obfuscations, his lies, his primitive attempts at codes, his trying to get out. he was clearly not, even for the government's claim, involved in any kind of atomic-related espionage. He was not involved in passing on the green glass material. So that, again, I think the harsh vindictive sentence against Sobel was an attempt to crank him, to get him to cooperate.
Our trial, you must understand, was a political trial in the truest sense of the word, in that the purpose of the trial was not to ascertain guilt or innocence of the people accused. The purpose of the trial was political, to send a notice to the American people and to the rest of the world that we were declaring war on communism. And one way of declaring war is by killing people. So this was part of the whole Cold War. The trial was part of the whole Cold War.
The bottom line is that my co-author and I think that Julius Rosenberg was head of a active, ongoing Soviet espionage network, not necessarily involving atomic material, but anything that they could gather of the military defense or technical related matter, industrial matter, that could be of use to the Soviets. And they saw this as aiding humanity. They did not see this as anything improper or immoral or wrong.
Barr visited the sons of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. At every turn, the case confronted him.
The Radosh thesis is, the beginning of Radosh's thesis is that my parents dropped out of political activity in 1943 to become spies.
In fact, that's not the Radosh thesis, that's the trial testimony. That's what Greenglass said at the trial. And we're wondering if you have any
and it's very hard to find people who will come forward and say, we knew them and we...
At a certain moment, up until 43, it looks like this. You correct me if I'm wrong. Up until 43, he was openly a communist, spouting his ideas at every moment, you know, not being afraid to tell people that he's a party and getting them to join or things like that. And very, at this point, he went into hiding. He was no longer. That's just fantastic. That is absolutely, because I remember him to the last day when, you know, we parted. We parted, sort of. I told him, he knew I was leaving, and we had a little argument about that. I don't know if it was an argument or something, but I remember saying that it's probably a mistake to leave, you know, things like that, that this is your country. But I told him that I wanted to see, I'd love my job and so on, and I wanted to see Europe, and then he sort of agreed. But up until that time, I always knew him as he was a paragon of a communist. He was the guy that really got me into the party.
Back in Leningrad, Barr shows off the apartment where he now lives alone. His divorced wife and 2 of his 4 children are in Prague. The other 2 have defected to the West.
This grand piano here was thrown away, typical Soviet, as we say, wastefulness. They just threw it out in the garbage. And I found it, put it all together again, and it turned out to be a piano which was made in a factory over 100 years ago. One of the first items of furniture I bought when I started to work was a furniture set, and there was a tea table of this kind of a design. And I enjoyed it. I liked it very much, and I've used it now in this thing which I've made here. It's really not finished yet, but the basic idea is here. Then the question came up of how to make chairs. I wanted a comfortable chair. Well, these 2 objects are not the last word. I'm going to work on it still, but the basic idea, as you see, it's a lounging chair, and I make a lot of jokes about this chair, especially when women come here, as you can understand. Now, this is I've tested it, and I think it's as comfortable as any chair that you could. What the most important feature, of course, is that the legs are put up a little bit, and probably that's one of the reasons why I don't have varicose veins.
Since Alfred Sarant's death, Joel Barr has continued to work in Leningrad. He and Carol Dayton have shared a unique experience as Americans living behind the Iron Curtain and moving in influential military-industrial circles for 40 years. At this point, both would end their long exile and return to the United States if circumstances permit. But that could prove difficult.
When I left, I didn't take any papers with me. So now I have a big job trying to prove I cannot prove that I am this guy, Joel Barr.
Well, it must be kind of amazing for you coming back to your old alma mater here.
Yes, but not the law school.
But not the law school, right?
That's right. I didn't even know there was a law school here when I went here. It was absolutely.
And you didn't know that eventually you would be part of the library of the law school.
Yes. So I'm quite honored.
I'm quite honored to be in the FBI files in the library.
I'd like to put my autograph here. Oh, they have it downstairs.
Right. Right. All right. Well, this is the place where your files are, the Rosenberg files, Sarant's file.
Well, I hope it's guarded.
Well, listen.
Feel safe.
Listen,
now, nobody can get in
now
here.
Listen. Let's face it. In the Soviet Union, nobody can get their files, right?
Now they can. It turns out now you can.
What
Did you hear about it the other day?
No, you mean you apply to the KGB and you get your files?
Absolutely. They said they claim even that it's easier than getting it from the FBI.
Not only are you returning here to your files, Joe, but your old college classmates are all here. Here's Morton Sobel's files, Rosenberg
In other words, I'm in good company, right?
That's right. You've all been converted.
Of course, so these people I don't know. Too bad I never knew them. Sidorovich, who else? Thomas Black.
Where are your files, Joel?
Well, Whitney has to show me. I remember. Not in this. Oh, it's over here, right?
Does it say?
Here we have. Here is me and my brother is here too. It turned out. Really, my whole family. My mother is here. I found out a lot of information about my family.
Really?
I'm really grateful. Well, I found my birth certificate.
Really?
They couldn't find my birth certificate, but I have been looking for my birth certificate for 2 years. And officially got an official answer.
And you found them in the...
And I found the number of my birth certificate, went down to the Department of Health, and in 5 minutes, after 2 years of searching in vain, spending $15 for each search, I got it in 5 minutes.
Well, this part of the file was...
So I thank J. Edgar Hoover. Presumptive releases.
Yeah.
I looked at some of them.
Were they of any interest?
They sound like this. In 1949, he was already he was spying a lot. Already in 1945, I was spying a lot. That's what's said there. And I've been looking to find out what did I do, but nothing else is said. I'm really annoyed that I have only 2 books. Look at this. Sobel has about 10 books.
Yes, he spent 18 years in jail. Would you like to have qualified?
Well, you see, is this a file? I'm really insulted. I've been looking for my birth certificate for about 2 years. And I've got an official answer that my birth certificate is, there is no birth certificate. I was not born in the United States, as if, you'd say. And I've been actually required to put in another application, which is called birth certificate delayed registration. In other words, I'm going to be born again now in 19... So looking through these files, one day, I all of a sudden discovered that I was born January the 1st, 1916. My mother's name, maiden name, and my father's name, and the most important thing is that the number of the certificate of registration.
And with that, you were able to
with that, I went down to the Department of Health, and in 5 minutes, I got my birth certificate. So I want to thank J. Edgar Hoover and everybody for this. I am under the files, as you explain this to me, it's called Espionage R. What does that mean?
That means Russian espionage.
Russian espionage.
The particular file that you're looking at goes back to 1948. At that time, you were traveling in
what month?
Europe,
August.
in August, right? And
I was in Europe already.
Right.
Yes.
Now,
and this says here. That's what interests me, as talking. Looking back, I am a citizen of the United States, and already it says here that I am being investigated as a spy, right? And they have a lot of information that I left to broaden background by continuous study in Europe. I applied to Delft and so on.
Is all that more or less accurate?
Before that's accurate, and it's before I even traveled, because I got this letters from them, tentative plans. I've studied for 2 years, and wanted to leave New York January the 1st for Stockholm. Studied then Delft for second year.
And said how you arranged your tour.
Who arranged the tours and everything. And it's very interesting,
Well, are you kind of amazed that they were following you that closely?
I didn't know then. I would have been amazed then. But could you explain to me by what right? I mean, where in the law can they follow anybody at that time? They had the right to follow everybody? Doesn't matter?
Well, the FBI claims, judging by their files, that sometime after you left the United States, you recall you left the United States in around January 48, and sometime some months later, 6 or 8 months later, they claimed that as a result of they haven't revealed how, but perhaps decoded messages from Russian espionage, that among other names, they saw your name and therefore wanted to know whether you were involved in Soviet espionage and began investigating you, so that all the time you were in Europe for those 2 years, either the FBI or occasionally the CIA were more or less following after you, checking on you, and so on. Until such time as you left Western Europe and went to Czechoslovakia.
What you're saying is that sometime even before I left, I had already been, according to them, allegedly, working as a spy.
Yes, they thought that you had been working as a spy in 1944 because the decoded messages were all from 1944.
Right. And here I am, being investigated as a spy, right? For about how many years? According to this, from 1944, even.
Well, they said that you appeared to have been involved in espionage in 1944, and they assumed that when you left the United States in 48, it was to do more work for Soviet intelligence in Europe. And later on, they said that you were part of or connected with in some way the so-called Rosenberg spy ring.
In other words, the FBI already had information, some kind of information, which is not clear.
Well, they've
on
never
what basis did they start thinking that I was a spy? They must have had some kind of information, which is not released here. Well, what do you tell a person when he tells you that you're a murderer or a spy or something like that, and you're not? According to the United States law and the Constitution, I don't have to prove there's such a thing as presumption of innocence. They have to tell me that we found something like that. Now, what could be here? What is there?
Well, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? That interesting in the sense of this is what happens with the files, that often files are released and they're completely useless. This file is completely blanked out. All that it says on the top is urgent and the date, and then the following message, and that's all blanked out. So there are unfortunately many, many pages that are like that. And unless the complete files are released, it's really hard to form any judgment. But certainly with the files that have been released to date, what you say can't be argued with, which is that there's not a bit of evidence in there of any kind of illegal activity.
Here is a mail's cover to my mother. Now, I've read in the other places, in 1951, that they went to her, disguised as and asked about me. They made a whole story up that they were friends of mine or something like that. And